I walked into my own business meeting to find a stranger sitting in my chair, wearing my badge, and presenting my 3 years of work as his own. My business partner of 5 years had sold my stake in our company without my signature, without my knowledge, and without a single phone call. 47 of our clients were already in that conference room waiting for the presentation I had built from scratch. What happened in the next 40 minutes got picked up by 2 financial news outlets and a true crime podcast. My name is Leigh, and at 29 years old, I thought I was building something real. Turns out I was building it for someone else. Let me back up. 3 years ago, my business partner and I co-founded a boutique marketing analytics firm in Chicago. We met in grad school, bonded over cold pizza and shared ambitions, and decided we were going to do something neither of our families had ever done: build a company from nothing and make it matter. I handled all the data strategy, the client pitches, the late nights redesigning dashboards. Nobody asked us to redesign, but that we knew would make the difference. He handled the operations side. We split everything 50-50 and signed a partnership agreement that I paid an actual attorney to draft. For 2 years, we struggled the way every small business struggles. We ate ramen for dinner at 11 at night and called it a working meal. We turned down social events to cold call potential clients on Saturday mornings. I refinanced my car to cover a payroll gap when we lost our second biggest account in the same month. My mother thought I had lost my mind. My friends stopped inviting me to things because I always canceled. But we were building something, and I believed in it with everything I had. By year 3, we had 47 clients, a real office space in the West Loop, and a deal on the table with a regional media conglomerate that would have tripled our revenue. The deal was almost entirely a result of my work. I had spent 8 months cultivating the relationship with their VP of strategy, flying to their Denver office on a red-eye twice, and creating a custom analytics framework specifically tailored to their infrastructure. I did not find out what my partner did until I showed up to close that deal myself. I walked into our office at 7:45 in the morning, earlier than usual, because I wanted to run through the presentation one last time before the clients arrived at 9. The elevator opened on our floor, and I immediately knew something was wrong. The receptionist, a college junior we had hired 6 months earlier, looked up at me from behind her desk with an expression I can only describe as trapped, like she had been told something she desperately did not want to be responsible for. I said good morning, and she said it back in a voice that was approximately 1 decibel above nothing. I walked past her toward the main conference room, and through the glass walls I could see people already in. That was strange. It was not even 8 in the morning. I pushed open the door and stopped. My business partner was at the head of the table. He was wearing the charcoal blazer he only brought out for important meetings. Sitting next to him was a man I had never seen before, mid-40s, expensive haircut, the kind of quiet confidence that comes from a background that never required him to second-guess himself. Between them on the table were printed copies of my presentation, my exact slides, my graphs, my data models, my color-coded quarterly projections, all of it. And on the lanyard around the stranger's neck was a badge with the company logo and his name. Not a visitor badge, an employee badge. My partner looked up, and for exactly 1/2 of 1 second, raw panic crossed his face. Then he smoothed it over into something that tried to pass for casual. He said my name like I was a colleague he had not expected to see this early, like I was the one who had walked into the wrong room. I did not say anything yet. I looked at the man next to him. I looked at the badge. I looked at my slides on the table, and I counted how many copies were printed. Then I looked back at my partner and I asked very quietly who this person was. My partner cleared his throat and said this was the firm's new chief strategy officer. He said it like he was reading from a script he had practiced, but had hoped he would not need to use today. I asked him when we had hired a chief strategy officer. He said the paperwork had gone through last week. I asked him to repeat that. He did. I had not been to the office last week because I had been in Denver at the media conglomerate's headquarters, finalizing details for the meeting that was now apparently happening without my full understanding of what it actually was. I had spent 4 days in a hotel room working 16-hour sessions to make sure we were ready to close the biggest deal of our company's life, and while I was doing that, my partner was back in Chicago signing paperwork I had never seen. I asked him to step outside with me. He started to say something about the meeting prep, and I told him the meeting could wait 5 minutes, and something in my voice made him get up from the chair without arguing. In the hallway, I asked him to explain to me exactly what was happening. He had this way of starting difficult conversations by building a little nest of context around the actual thing he needed to say. Like if he surrounded it with enough reasonable-sounding words, the core fact would somehow be less of what it was. He told me he had been doing a lot of thinking. He said the company was at a crossroads. He said we needed serious operational leadership to scale, and that when this opportunity came along, he had to move fast. I told him to skip to the part where he explained how any of this happened without my signature. He paused, and then he said he had reached out to our attorney about the partnership structure. I felt something cold move through my chest. I said, "Our attorney." He nodded and said that under our original agreement there was a clause, one we had put in during the early days when we were both terrified of being deadlocked on decisions, that allowed either partner to make operational decisions unilaterally if the other partner was unreachable for more than 72 hours on a time-sensitive matter. I stared at him. He told me he had sent me a text about this last Tuesday. A text. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled back. He had sent me a message at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night while I was on a red-eye back from Denver that said, "Thinking about bringing in a CSO, we should talk." I had seen it when I landed at 6 a.m. and had mentally flagged it for the weekend because it read like a casual idea, not a legal action already in motion. That single text message was his documentation of attempting to contact me. And because I had not responded within 72 hours, I had been slammed with prep work and assumed it was a low-priority conversation. He had invoked the clause and signed a deal that restructured our partnership. The new CSO had not just been hired, he had been given equity. Specifically, he had been brought in as a 15% stakeholder in exchange for a cash infusion from his personal investment group. Money my partner desperately needed because, as I was about to learn, he had made some financial decisions with company funds that he had not told me about either. My 15% had been quietly dissolved into a minority share. On paper, as of the previous Thursday, I was no longer a co-equal partner in the company I had built. I was a minority shareholder with no board seat and no veto power over my own client relationships. The media conglomerate meeting, the one I had spent 8 months building, was now going to close under the new structure. My work would be presented as the company's work, and the company no longer included me in any meaningful way. My partner finished explaining all of this in the hallway of our office at 7:51 in the morning, 12 minutes before I had to walk back into that conference room and sit down like nothing had happened. He said he knew it was a lot to take in. He said he hoped I understood it was a business decision, not a personal one. He said he valued everything I had brought to the firm, and he was confident we could work out the details of my new role in a way that felt fair. He used the word fair while describing the thing he had just done to me. I took a breath. I looked at the closed conference room door. I could hear the low murmur of voices inside. The new CSO making small talk with the receptionist, who had probably been told to keep me occupied if I arrived early. I told my partner I needed 5 minutes alone. He looked relieved, like he thought 5 minutes meant I was going to compose myself and then come back and cooperate. He went back into the conference room. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. I was not composing myself. I was working. I spent exactly 4 minutes and 40 seconds on that laptop before I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked back toward the conference room. On my way, I stopped at the receptionist's desk. She looked at me, still with that guilty, cornered expression. I told her not to worry, that none of this was her fault, and she visibly deflated with relief. Then I walked into the conference room. My partner looked up. The new CSO looked up. Through the glass, I could see 2 of our support staff hovering near the kitchenette, watching. I pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table from my partner, because if he was going to sit at one head, I was going to sit at the other, and I set my laptop down and opened it and I said, "Good morning, everyone." The clients from the media conglomerate arrived at 9 a.m. exactly. There were 4 of them. The VP of strategy I had spent 8 months building a relationship with, their in-house data director, a senior legal counsel, and an executive assistant who was clearly there to take notes on everything. My partner greeted them at the elevator and made introductions. He introduced the new CSO by name and title. He introduced me by name only, with a half-second hesitation before he added my role, which he described as lead data architect, not co-founder, not partner, lead data architect. The way you'd introduce someone you had hired recently but were still figuring out how to explain. The VP of strategy shook my hand and looked at me with a warmth that her expression didn't give to anyone else in the room. She said it was wonderful to finally meet me in person after all our conversations. She said she had been looking forward to hearing me present today. My partner's smile flickered. The meeting started. My partner opened with company overview slides, the corporate structure, the team, the vision. The new CSO presented himself with the kind of polished confidence of a man who is very good at presenting someone else's work as a natural extension of his own expertise. He was charming, he was smooth, he said the word scalability 4 times in 8 minutes, which is always a tell. Then it was time for the data strategy presentation, the one I had built, the one sitting in printed copies on the table in front of everyone. My partner looked at the new CSO and gestured toward the screen. I stood up before either of them could say a word. I said I would be presenting the data strategy since I developed it. The room shifted. My partner's jaw tightened. The new CSO looked at me and then at my partner in a single smooth sweep of his eyes, recalibrating. I did not wait for permission. I connected my laptop to the projector, pulled up my own copy of the presentation, and I began. Here is something I have learned about being a woman who is very good at her work in rooms that were not necessarily designed for her. When you step up to a projector screen in a conference room full of people who are expecting a performance, and instead you deliver something real, actual insight, actual data, actual answers to questions the client has been silently carrying around for months, the room changes. The social dynamic dissolves. What's left is just the work. I had spent 8 months learning this company's problems. I knew their customer churn patterns better than their own analytics team did. I knew exactly where their content investment was bleeding and why, and I had built a model that would not just diagnose the problem, but give them a 6-month action map to correct it. I presented for 42 minutes. I answered every question. At one point, the VP of strategy leaned forward and said, "And I will never forget this. This is exactly what I have been trying to get our internal team to build for 2 years." She said it looking directly at me, not at the logo on the slides, not at my partner sitting at the other end of the table, at me. During the Q&A portion, my partner tried twice to redirect certain questions toward the new CSO. Both times, the VP of strategy gently but clearly readdressed her follow-up directly to me. The meeting ended at 10:50. The VP of strategy shook my hand last and held it for a moment. She said she was very much looking forward to moving forward. She said it in a tone that was specific enough that I understood she was not speaking generically about the firm. After the clients left, the conference room held that particular silence that comes when something significant has happened and nobody has decided yet who is going to say it out loud first. My partner said my name. He started with the qualifier, "I know today was a lot and I think we should." I told him I had submitted a formal legal notice to our partnership attorney 17 minutes ago, from my desk, before the meeting started. He stopped. I told him I had also, in those same 17 minutes, pulled our original partnership agreement and reviewed the full text of the clause he had cited. And I had discovered something our attorneys had apparently not mentioned when he advised my partner on his unilateral action, or perhaps had mentioned and my partner had chosen to ignore. The clause only permitted unilateral operational decisions. It did not permit equity restructuring. Bringing in an outside stakeholder in exchange for capital was not an operational decision. It was a fundamental change to the partnership structure, and it required my written consent under a completely separate provision of the same agreement. The equity deal my partner Hadson signed was not just ethically wrong, it was contractually invalid. The new CSO, who had been standing quietly near the door, said in a very measured voice that he was going to step out and call his attorney. My partner's face went through several colors. He said he had consulted with the firm attorney. I told him our firm attorney had a conflict of interest the size of the Sears Tower, since my partner was the one who had called him, and that I had retained independent counsel the night before. Because here is what my partner had not thought about. I had been preparing for this meeting for 8 months, which meant I had every email, every shared document, every version of our business plan, and every hour of work logged with timestamps going back to the day we signed our first client. I had not known what I was preparing for exactly, but when you spend 3 years building something, you keep your records clean. The reason I had retained independent counsel the nights before was not because I suspected what he had done. It was because during one of my final prep calls with the VP of strategy, she had mentioned casually, people mention things assume you already know, that she had received a revised engagement structure document from our firm 2 days earlier that listed the new CSO as the primary account lead on our contract. Not me, I had never seen that document. I had never been told it existed. And when she mentioned it, something shifted in my stomach that I could not name at the time but recognized clearly now. I had called an attorney that night, not because I had proof of anything. I had called because I had been building things long enough to know when the foundation under my feet felt wrong. My partner sank into a chair. He said he had not realized the equity clause was a separate provision. He said he genuinely thought he was operating within the agreement. He said a lot of things very quickly and very quietly, and underneath all of them was the obvious truth that he had hoped the meeting would go well and the deal would close. And by the time I understood the full picture, we would be far enough downstream that the practical costs of undoing it would feel prohibitive. He had assumed I would calculate the pain of fighting and decide it wasn't worth it. He did not know me as well as he thought he did. That afternoon, the independent attorney I had retained sent a formal notice to my partner and the new CSO declaring the equity restructuring agreement void under the terms of our original partnership contract. Within 48 hours, the new CSO's investment group, after a brief and I imagine very tense conversation with their own legal team, agreed not to contest it. The equity deal unwound. The new CSO resigned his nominal position and walked away, having narrowly avoided being party to a contract dispute that his own lawyers apparently told him he would not win. My partner spent 3 days trying to call me before I agreed to meet with him. When we finally sat down together, he did not try to argue his case. He said he had gotten scared. He said our growth had slowed in Q2, and he had panicked about the Denver deal falling through, and he had made a decision out of fear that he had dressed up in the language of strategy. He said he was sorry. He said it like he meant it, which made it harder, not easier. I told him that the part that hurt most was not the legal maneuver. Legal maneuvers happen. Businesses get messy. I told him what actually hurt was that he had looked at 5 years of my work. 5 years of me staying late and flying red eyes and refinancing things I should not have had to refinance, and he had made a calculation that I was worth less than he was. He did not argue with that. He could not. We dissolved the partnership 3 weeks later. It was not clean and it was not fast, but it was final. I took primary ownership of the client relationships I had developed, including the media conglomerate deal, which the VP of Strategy specifically requested be assigned to my independent entity before she would sign anything. My partner retained the operational infrastructure and 3 accounts that had been primarily his relationships. We split the rest down the middle as the original agreement had always specified. I had to start over. A company of one, with a laptop and a client list and a reputation that had somehow emerged from the most professionally destabilizing morning of my life, intact enough to build on. It was terrifying. It was also, eventually, the thing I needed. Within 6 months, I had rebuilt under my own name. Within a year, I had 16 clients, 4 full-time employees, and a revenue number that was higher than what my share of the old firm had ever generated. I hired a COO who had 20 years of operational experience and 0 interest in ever touching anyone's equity structure without written consent from every party, which I required to be a term of her employment contract. The media conglomerate deal closed. It was the biggest contract I had ever signed. The VP of Strategy sent me a handwritten note when the ink was dry. She said she had always intended to work with me specifically, not with the firm's name. She said she had waited to see how the situation resolved itself before she committed, because she wanted to make sure she was putting her company's trust in someone who would still be standing when things got complicated. I have that note on my desk. It is not framed, it just sits there next to my keyboard where I can see it. My former partner and I do not speak often. When we do, it is civil. He rebranded, brought in a different operations lead, and the company is still running. I hope it does well. I do not say that with any trace of sarcasm. The anger burned out a long time ago. What I carry now is something quieter, a very clear-eyed understanding of the difference between people who build with you and people who build on top of you, and an absolute refusal to confuse the two again. I spent 5 years making myself smaller in that partnership, deferring on decisions I should have fought for, letting credit diffuse into the company when it should have had my name on it. I told myself that was what collaboration looked like. That being a team player meant not insisting on being seen. I know better now. If you have ever had someone take something you built and casually restructure your value out of it, I want you to know that the document that saves you is almost never the one you thought to keep. It is the 3 years of emails. It is the logged hours. It is the timestamp on the file that proves who made the first version of the thing they are now calling theirs. Keep your records, know your agreements, and if something feels wrong at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, do not flag it for the weekend. Call the attorney in the morning. If this story hit close to home, drop something in the comments. I would genuinely love to hear from you. Hit like and subscribe for more stories about what it actually looks like to start over and come out standing. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their work has always been worth more than whatever someone else decided to pay for it.